Okay, we're live here. This is my very first podcast episode. I want to welcome everybody to Behind the House. And really, what gave me the inspiration for Behind the House was, in a way, how I grew up. And that was in the mortgage business. You see, I got into the business in about 2003. All right. I had just turned 20 years old. And I stumbled along the banking industry. And I'll tell you a little bit how that whole ordeal happened. You see, if you come to know me, you know I really, really like food. And coincidentally, specifically, I should say rather, roast beef sandwiches from Quiznos. It's a soft spot for me. I truly do love those things. So I had one of the crappiest jobs in the world. I was going door to door in every high rise building and commercial outlet inside of downtown Seattle. Which is pretty good size. And my job would be to go up there and see if I could get people to get a quote on mainly stationery and paper products. So I got to know the city pretty well. And as I would go through there, of course, I would work up an appetite. I mean, being told, no, I don't need a quote on my business cards over and over and over, you can actually get very, very hungry, especially at the age of 20. So what happened was, at 20, you really don't have your finances in order. And I was definitely no exception to the rule. Now, in that process, I decided I was going to feast on a large roast beef sandwich to reward myself after a day of prospecting from about 8:30 in the morning until about 5, probably about 3 o'clock in the middle of the day. So I took my break. I went in and swipe my card. Things were good. Now, debit cards at this time, they're still pretty cool. It's great. I'm 20. I got a debit card. It's fantastic. Just keep swiping. That's what I told myself, at least. So I think the sandwich cost me about $13. And lo and behold, when I did that same time, Singular Wireless, and this is, of course, during that time period of when you had your nighttime minutes, which were unlimited, and then you had your daytime minutes, which ultimately cost you, like, you only had like 600 minutes. Okay, and for those of you who are just trying to put a timestamp on this, if you remember the old Nokia, I think it was like the 4800 phone that had a snake on it. It was really cool. I thought I was balling at that point. Anyways, fast forward. Singular Wireless took a direct debit out of my account, and they took pretty much everything I had except for $11. Mind you, the sandwich was $13, and the way that banking works, they remove the debits first and then they credit anything else. So my $13 sandwich ended up costing me about $43 because I had a negative fee. So I did what any 20-year-old would do. Called my grandma. And I asked my grandma for some money to cover my sandwich until I got paid the next day. She did, because I have the world's most amazing grandma. But what happened right after that changed my life forever. Okay? I walk into the bank that I was banking at, and I meet this incredible guy. Like, we just hit it off. And at the time, remember, I'm making my own business cards. So to prove what type of entrepreneur I am, I put on my business cards, because we printed them and we made them, I was the director of new business development. Yep. Always wore nice suits, dressed nice. And I went to the gentleman who I eventually found out was a branch manager. And I told him, hey, if there's ever a problem with my account, please, here is my card. Call me. And he just kind of looked at it. And if you're watching the video, you can see the facial expressions. He looked at it, looked at me, looked at it, looked at me, kind of raised an eyebrow like The Rock, and shook my hand after a nice conversation. And I was on my way, thinking I would never hear from the guy again. Well, that guy definitely served as a mentor for me for years afterwards, because he recruited this young 20-year-old kid to be a banker in downtown Seattle. And after that, I excelled and went into the mortgage industry. In that process, though, I was trying to buy my own house. And Well, needless to say, it sucked. I mean, it was a nightmare. I couldn't figure out how there were so many people and who was I supposed to talk to, and how do I understand these numbers? I will never forget when I got to the closing table. All right, I had to call my mom on my Nokia cell phone. I had to excuse myself because I was told it was going to be a zero down loan, but I needed to bring $972 to closing for earnest money, which I'm sure we're going to unpack later on. But also, I saw something called the truth in lending statement. Now, for those of you who don't know what a truth in lending statement is, that is the document at the time that tells you how much interest and how much over the period of 30 years that you're going to pay on that home loan. Now, the house I bought was like 164,000. So they wanted over a period of 30 years, 300,000. I was making only a couple grand at the time. And, I did that penguin move, which I've become notorious for when I get really stressed out or I see a huge amount of money. I'll try to step back. So if you're watching this video, it's where your arms come to your side and you're like, whoa, yeah, that was me. I did that, and I had to call my mom and tell her I don't have $300,000. Should I really be doing this? She calmed me down. I went back inside of the room. I signed all of the papers. In the process, of course, I got declined like 4 or 5 times. Different mortgage companies who, oddly enough, aren't around. And then I thought about how much the experience really sucked. And so I thought to myself, after working in the banking industry, I could take a step in this direction. And the whole entire process fascinated me. It was very entrepreneurial, which could be a gift and it could be a curse, depending on who's running the business. It's just like any other business, but there's a ton of players that are involved. And I really wanted to utilize this podcast behind the house to tell you, or actually help bring to light who all the players are and who the ones who are doing it the very best and what makes them unique. And also, if you're going to be buying a house or refinancing a house, what is it that you should know that not everybody always tells you or you don't hear in the average mortgage conversation? We're going to talk about the difference between the guys that you meet inside of the bank and the guys that you meet inside of a mortgage bank or a mortgage broker. We're going to talk to some of the greatest real estate agents in the country. I've had the privilege of meeting them when I've been speaking at different events and also just through mutual friends. Social media really helps. And also what people who are investing in real estate are doing and what are some of the loan programs. We're going to answer some questions and we're really going to unpack it because the whole goal is with Behind the House, we are going to peel the veil back. You are going to get an inside look. And of course, my whole goal with this entire thing is to learn myself and be a student because we're going to have so many great business owners inside of the real estate world, whether it's from the lending side or it's from the real estate side. I too am going to be a student. And hopefully you guys are sending in questions and interacting with the podcast on social media so that I can answer a lot of the questions that you might have. The lending world is changing all the time. I never knew how much politics plays into it, Wall Street, and then, of course, just human emotion. You think about the average group there is involved in a home loan transaction. Typically, you have a buyer and a seller, okay? Then, of course, you have a buyer's agent and you have a seller's agent. Then along those lines, you also have an escrow agent, you have a title agent, you have a home loan officer, you have their underwriter, their processor, possibly an assistant or a production helper, a home inspector, septic, the county. Then you have, of course, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, or all these other different players. And of course, we want to know what they do. And if you are buying a house, you want the inside scoop. You want to know what the best practices are so that you can avoid the potholes. I read in a book recently, it's one of my favorite books out right now by Austin Kleon. He actually helped inspire me to do this podcast. And he says that all advice is autobiographical. Essentially, when we give advice or we're receiving advice, we're actually receiving it in the form of our younger selves. So maybe not in the form of age, but let's just simplify it and break it down a little bit more. Anytime you give somebody advice, you're doing it from the perspective of that's what I went through. That was my experience. And you're doing that and you're passing it on to somebody who's about to go through the experience so that you can help them avoid the potholes. Well, that is that. That is pretty much episode 1. So, of course, you can interact with me on social media. Again, the whole goal is to get a life of its own. If you are a real estate professional or someone in the home loan industry and you're listening to this podcast, know that we're going to try to unpack the secrets of what make great real estate agents and loan officers. What do they do daily so that you can implement it? And it'll also help those of you who are looking to buy or refinance a home find somebody who has these qualities. So I appreciate you guys. I appreciate you so much for being on this journey with me. I am excited. You can, of course, catch the podcast on all of your audio platforms, your Spotify, your iTunes, all the fun ones there. And of course, on social media. And let us not forget, we, of course, are going to have the video experience on YouTube. I'm Sean Guerrero. Thank you for tuning in to my very first episode. And I look forward to talking with you and my special guests on episode 2. I'm Sean Guerrero, and I'm out.